Hi, welcome guys. Welcome to my MBTI sub channel. No, it's not even a channel, but anyway, series. And talking about this time is finally we start to get into introvert. And yep, this time we are going to talk about ISFP. So basically, yeah, ISFP, yeah, special beings. Why? Because usually when it comes to like the I type of people, when and already explained something like the first extroversion, the last alphabet itself is trying to show you the first extroverted function. And since they're introvert, so somehow like their first function itself is an introvert, and their first extroverted function itself is something on the second position. So you can understand this way. So actually, for ISFP, they are much more J rather than P. And the same thing goes to the J type as long as you are introverted. Like ISFJ, you're much more P rather than J. And for ISFP, it's much more J rather than P. But that's much more like a normal way, like just a sense for you to understand why sometimes you feel like the introverted people are kind of different. And yeah, just for a reminder for you, so basically MBTI is trying to talk about how your brain is going to function. It's like the pattern that how you function onto it. It's not something like a judgmental in the end, and it just showing how you're gonna just react onto it in terms of pattern, in terms of what you receive. Yeah, so basically coming this way. And this time we are going to talk about ISFP. So if you ever know someone who is like an introvert, so you are thinking that they are supposed to look quiet, they are supposed to be not talkative, and everything just inside their heart. Okay, that is like partially correct, but not everything. I'll just try to remind you all, especially when you just come into like the sense of when when they need solo time. Yes, when they need solo time, they need like yeah only themselves, personal time, and they try to cool down things. Yeah, they need more energy, focus onto like something inside their heart. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that when they go out, they will just waste their energy. It's that they go out, they try what they can do using their energy. So it's a little bit different type of like an idea in the end. Yeah. So while just writing out down everything. Yeah. So let's go through it. So ISFP, going with the ego of ISFP itself. The first function is FI, is a very strong sense of self-value as well as like a personal feeling. Personal feeling itself is somehow links very much onto authentic, yeah, authentic feelings. It's not something that okay, socially you need to be condemned, socially you need to be happy, socially you need to be angry, socially you need to be sad. No, they're talking about like a really like their own feeling. At the same time, because of they always like facing their own feeling really like honestly, most of the time they're facing it really honestly. So if somebody is lying, usually every type of people will just catch it really quick. Like even me, ESFP is like very easy for me to sense it. For ISFP as well, they can just sense it really quick, and they can't help. Yeah, they will just judge by their own feeling. Yeah, so a little bit different from those Like it's kind of different from the ESFP in a sense, because for me ESFP, I starting with sensing. I can't help but I keep on sensing everything around me, but then for them it's like judgment itself. They can't help but using this kind of judgment, like a moral judgment, from time to time. They can't really change it, but what they can change is that either they go on to their action, or they go with the method of like a meditation, or they go on to something like a personal, like a sensations, and or like they go with something creativity. There's something that they can't really just control their judgment, but they can choose their perceiving functions. So it's much more onto like industry. So there's their ego for ISFP. Then we go to their subconscious, which is the ENTJ. So in a sense, much more easy way for you to understand. Usually ISFP, they need like a alone time for them to back to them to be themselves. But if they found out something, they want to make it out, they want to try it out, they want to just make it into an experiment and like really like execute it. And during this time, they are really like trying to find some ways, and they are trying to using their introverted intuition to choose that destination, what I need to do, what I need to reach. So they draw that line, they draw that map out, and they just go along with it. So that's how they, from ISFP, go to the ENTJ. That's the subconscious. But if FI type of people, because always they are trying to prove that they are morally correct, their feeling is true, is correct, and it is good. And a lot of time, like when you're trying to get into a society, and you know, like people are always asking why, and you can't really answer why itself, and you have so much feeling, like your authentic feeling inside of you, and somehow it will just crush you. So a lot of time for FI type of people, like I mean, for every type of people, for me ESFP, I like to just think. But for the ISFP, because their fear is TE, so somehow TE become their, how should I say it? Like T become their fear. So because of the fear, they need to think. They need somebody to make it structurized. But when no, when there's nobody like tries to make it structurized or take away what they think, take away what they had learned about it, and deny whatever they knew that is like good, and just gonna just tear them down in a sense. So yeah, but luckily they are ISFP. So what does it mean? Right here, they are trying to perform it out all the time with their FI. So they are proving in this way in this society. Yeah, sure. As long as you prove something, it means that it can be solid. It can be a foundation for you to believe everything. And but then when they go on to their unconscious, so basically I say it's like starting from the parents function number two, and it come onto it. People are trying to deny their performance, or like not letting them to do any kind of performance, and it will just trigger their introverted sensing. So it means that their comfort zone is being challenged, and they don't have any way to make it out. So they will just start to go on to extra for the feeling. So it's much more like they try to sense a lot like other people's feeling. And usually ISFP during this time they'll feel like really disturbed, because they can't help, and they need to like keep on feeling other people way of feeling it, and they need to process with their brain in this way. It's not really like brain, okay, but it's much more like because of the thought process. So we just think it as a brain, but in a sense, it's much more like onto the emotion. So usually, like in our church, we'll say that oh, they are trying to process with their heart. Yeah, we're just saying that's way. But anyway, it's a thought process. So yeah, if even if we say that it's like process with their brain, it still makes sense. And that's how the ISFP got into the unconscious ESFP mode. So during this time, usually they will start to connect with people, start to like try to talk with other people, and they're trying to reach out for help. Yeah, that is what they are doing usually for ISFP. And if everything, they try to reach out for help, trying to seeking for other people's understanding, and even even like they try to find all kind of way of like a judgment to find like the final answer itself is still not finding it. Then they will go to the last one, and basically they go to their INTP. So just now I already said that their fear is coming from the TE, so like ignorance fear. So especially when all your logos is being like suddenly being taken away. So during the time, suddenly they need to like think everything like a really genuinely or like initiated by them. Yeah, and it's just making them like a really like a fearful, and at the same time they are trying to expand it onto everybody. So it's much more like, okay, let's go with the feelings. So with my morality, I prove everything is right or wrong. I prove it to you from my morality, and so then you go to something like a correct and false, like true and false, and like trying to prove that this is true, that's false, and everything like going this way. It's like really INTP mode onto this one, and they will just expand and with other people's like a pattern. So it's much more like using with this information and like using like my extroverted intuitions, the creativity way, and trying to prove things to be right or wrong. And basically, because right here, their parents' function is not the judgment, but their extroverted sensing. So extroverted sensing parent, and they are trying to taking over onto the ignorance as well. So usually it's an action showing that is it true or false. And instead of INTP, you will feel much more like an ISTP in a sense. I mean, most of the time, yeah, even we go to ENTJ itself, basically, even though we say ESFJ, but because of the SI itself is much more conquering by the NI. So even though they back out, they choose to back out. So it's much more feeling like an ENFJ. Yeah, I choose the feeling, I choose to back out. But it's much more like because their parents' function suddenly becomes so immature. So yeah, still like we'll just say that yeah, they got into their NE. Yeah, in this kind of sense. So if we try to understand them by grouping it, so for sure, there are additions. For me, knowing some ISFP itself, like always, I don't know why, but yeah, they get into like a IT. I mean, the computational science or whatever, like programming. Yeah, they're really good at it. Yeah, and somehow they are really much more creative compared with a lot of my other friends. Yeah, I will give them credit onto it. And surprisingly, because like I already said, communication type itself. Last time we only have like a starter and structure, and this time we are going to like a finisher and background, heavily focus onto it. And for ISFP, their communication type is actually background. So they are informative and they're responding, and they go under control. So what does it mean? Like they go with a certain promise, like with certain type of the promise. So they will give all the informations, and they are much more like waiting somebody to give them a direction. Yeah, from time to time, they are always waiting onto it, and that's why they they are much more like we say, in a sense, for a lot of people. Wow, they are much more a little bit loyal, but actually for ISFP, if we try to look at in a majority way of like statistically. So ISFP a lot of time is much more like they having fear onto what they choose. Yeah, how it just form just because of like the morality, and as well as like the people who usually fit them are ESFJ, ESTJ, and we go to ISFJ and even ENTP. So basically, every single one of them, except the ENTP, so they are all much more onto like going with system, and they going with the whole hierarchy thingy, and instead of like they they giving direct directions onto the ISFP, they are much more like waiting the ISFP to choose. In a sense, they will just voice out, but for them, it's like I just voice out my opinion, but somehow, yeah, for ISFP, they just want to be responding. So will just make them a little bit like confused. So because of the confused inside there and a long time for especially like the ISFP men, like because usually the society right now is much more leaning towards women. For women to have voice, women is much more greater than men. This kind of talks is coming out more often. Yeah, you need to admit that. And because of it, and it just make the ISFP man a lot of time is much more like uncomfortable and they are leaving. Yeah, so that's why. Yeah, part of the reason why these are happening. Yeah, why a lot of like ISFP men, in the end they just broke up. Yeah, and it just happened. It just happened. Yeah, but ISFP men they are really like a creative and they are really talented. So yeah, wish all the best to them, especially on matching blessing. I mean, there's a lot of ISFP men, yeah, for sure. That's kind of surprising, to be honest. But yeah, this is my first like introverted version of the MBTI. So yeah, I hope I can understand you all much more clearly because somehow you all have much more depth onto it. Instead of like a extroverted type of people, we are much more wide instead of deep into it. Yeah. So anyway, see ya. Yeah. See ya on my next video. See you.